This video is brought to you by Describe. When Wizards of the Coast started rolling out the covers for the 2024 core rulebooks, they also revealed some truly spectacular variant covers. The Player's Handbook variant cover by Wiley Beckert has this cozy image of some adventurers sitting and having tea with a golden dragon. The Monster Manual variant cover by Olenna Richards has an ominous image of a mind flayer holding a tadpole, seemingly straight out of the intro cinematic for Baldur's Gate 3. And hands down, my favorite of these is the Dungeon Master's Guide variant cover, also by Olenna Richards, which features Lolth the Spider Queen webbing up some hapless adventurer. And I remember seeing these covers and thinking, wow, these are really cool. It's a shame I'll never buy them, because I don't buy variant covers. And that's what we're talking about today. Why I never plan to buy a variant cover. By the way, just a note, technically the covers that we're talking about today are referred to as alternate covers, but I'm a longtime comic book fan, so I'll usually also refer to them as variant covers. I don't want that to be confusing, but quite frankly, I can't shake that term. It is too deeply embedded in my bones, so I'm probably going to use both terms interchangeably throughout this video. It's important to make sure that we are all on the same page, so I'm not misunderstood. After all, the words we use matter. It matters what we call things or what words we use to describe things. Which is why this video is sponsored by Describe. Describe is a fantastic online resource that offers pre-written scenes that you can read aloud in your games. You can find flavorful descriptions of adventure locations, items, characters, monsters, spells, actions you or your players might take in combat, dialogue for your NPCs, other planes of existence. They've got it all. And these descriptions are detailed, but also easy to understand, so you won't find yourself getting lost and disoriented while reading the text, like you might when you read the box text for a published adventure. And they've got a whole library of sci-fi scenes, so you don't have to feel limited by the trappings and tropes of medieval fantasy games like Dungeons and Dragons. And they've got maps you can drop directly into your game, complete with pre-written scenes for each section of the map. And they've got a library of music, sound effects, and ambient sounds that you can play for your group to help immerse them into the world of the game. And they've got blog posts with advice for running a better TTRPG game. In short, they've got everything you might possibly need to run the best possible campaign. And Describe is offering a discount to the viewers of this channel. If you visit describe.com/supergeek and use the promo code supergeek at checkout, you can save 10% off of your first subscription payment. Once again, that's dscryb.com/supergeek and use the promo code supergeek. Thank you so much to Describe for sponsoring this video. For those who don't know what I'm talking about or just need a little refresher, alternate covers were not a part of Wizards of the Coast D&D product line at the beginning of 5th edition. When we got the core rulebooks, there were no variant covers. Likewise, the early adventures also had no variant covers. There was nothing for Tyranny of Dragons, Prince of the Apocalypse, Out of the Abyss, or Curse of Strahd. Even Storm King's Thunder didn't have an alternate cover. And I say even Storm King's Thunder because on the same day as that book was announced, Wizards of the Coast also announced their first supplement for players and DMs, Volo's Guide to Monsters. And this was the first variant cover we got for 5th edition. The cover was designed by the artist Hydro74 and features a monochromatic image of a mind flayer's head staring at the camera with some cool designs around it. The mind flayer was chosen because the book offered a whole bunch of extra resources for running mind flayers like a layer map, some additional lore, and more stat blocks. It did that with a few different monsters, but mind flayers were one of the coolest, so they got the alternate cover. Meanwhile, the main cover featured a giant, probably to better tie it into the release of Storm King's Thunder, since they were coming out at around the same time. And as the years went on, we got more variant covers, often done by Hydro74. He did alternate covers for Xanathar's Guide to Everything, a re-release of the core rulebooks, the adventures Baldur's Gate Descent into Avernus, Icewind Dale Rime of the Frostmaiden, Strixhaven A Curriculum of Chaos, Wild Beyond the Witchlights, one of the re-releases of Tyranny of Dragons, and most recently, Vecna Eve of Ruin. And other artists did alternate covers for some other books. Big Represents Glory of the Giants was done by Olenna Richards, The Book of Many Things by Couple of Kooks, Candlekeep Mysteries by Simon Mayer, Eberron Rising from the Last War by Vance Kelly, Fizban's Treasury of Dragons by Anato Finn Stark, Mythic Odysseys of Theros by Kevin Tong, Phandelver and Below the Shattered Obelisk by DZO, Tasha's Cauldron of Everything by Wiley Beckert, and Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft by Scott M. Fisher. And when Wizards of the Coast re-released Xanathar's Guide, Tasha's Cauldron, and Monsters of the Multiverse, they all got these matching white covers. I don't know who did these covers, and I couldn't find the artists' names for the alternate covers for Quest from the Infinite Staircase, Ghosts of Saltmarsh, Journeys through the Radiant Citadel, Keys from the Golden Vault, and Dragonlance Shadow of the Dragon Queen. If you know who those artists were for those alternate covers, or if there are any other alternate covers that I forgot about, let me know in the comments below. I want to make sure that these artists are recognized and acknowledged, but it is surprisingly hard to find this information online. Now these are all really terrific covers, and later in the video I'm going to tell you which ones are my favorites, either because they do a great job of capturing something cool about the book, or just because they're evocative and interesting. But obviously this list of books is shorter than the full list of books that have been published since 2014, which means that there are a lot of books that do not have alternate covers. It also means that a lot of these books that do have alternate covers don't actually match each other, because they don't just have different artists, but they also have completely different designs for the front cover, back cover, and spine. And I really wish that didn't bother me, but it super duper does. Because if I'm going to have multiple books from the same franchise or series or whatever, they have to match. I just really, really do not like having something breaking up a matching set. And this has honestly always been the case. I'm 36, so I was a kid when the Harry Potter books were a big deal. Obviously, this was long before J.K. Rowling poisoned the brand and her mind with a bunch of hateful transphobia, which actually just recently got so bad that she was one of the leading voices in a harassment campaign against a cisgender boxer at the Olympics, just because this Olympic-level athlete in the sport of punching didn't happen to match Rowling's preconceptions of femininity. Enjoy getting hit with an Olympic-level libel lawsuit, Rowling. Maybe your castle will disapparate. But anyway, my family was actually in London a few years into the Harry Potter craze, and we found the second book on shelves in a bookstore, and I don't even know if it was out yet in America. It was actually in paperback in the UK. I don't know if that means that it had been out for a while and had already received its paperback release, or if they just release their books differently than we do and release the paperback versions earlier. Here in the USA, paperback versions of books come out long after the hardcover versions, but I don't know if that was also how it worked in the UK. But with 2 kids on this trip excited to learn about what came next in the adventures of Harry and the gang, we picked up a copy of Chamber of Secrets from a British bookstore. However, we purchased all of the rest of the books in the series in hardcover format in the United States. So for years, probably for more than a decade, we had one paperback book alongside a whole bunch of hardcovers from the same book series with a totally different cover art style and everything. And it bothered me more and more. And so one day, completely out of nowhere and with no provocation besides just getting frustrated seeing the books on the shelf and how one of them was just wrong, even though I don't even think I lived in my parents' house at that point anymore. I think I was just visiting for the holidays or something. But for whatever reason, I ran out to Barnes & Noble and picked up a hardcover copy of Chamber of Secrets that would match the others. But even that was not enough, because our first copy of the first book, The Sorcerer's Stone, was exactly like all the others, except it didn't say Year 1 on the spine. So once again, years after the series had been completed, but also still long before J.K. Rowling had lost her grip on reality, I went and bought a copy of The Sorcerer's Stone that matched the format of all the others, so it now said Year 1 on the spine. So hopefully that story helps to demonstrate exactly why it would be so very frustrating to me to have a D&D book on my shelf that didn't match the style of the rest of the 5e products. These variants wouldn't have the same black spine with the red flames at the top. Instead, the variant covers have spines that complement the artwork, which is great. I love that they do that for those artists. But that would not work for me. Now, sure, I could just include it on the shelf at the end of the row of official 5e books. After all, that's what I do with the third-party 5e books I own. They go after all the Wizards of the Coast books, so they don't break up the flow of my collection. But that also wouldn't work for me for variant covers, because I'm very particular with how I organize these books on my shelves. I want to jump in and make something very clear while we're on the subject of the books that I don't have. I am not asking anyone to send me any of the books that I don't have. I feel very uncomfortable asking anyone to send me copies of Wizards of the Coast books, given everything they've got going on. If there's a copy of a book that I want to track down, I will go to a local game store and find it there, or I'll check on eBay or something. I am not asking you to send me any of the books that I'm missing, and you can't even get a sense from this bookshelf of the ones that I'm missing because a lot of them are in the garage because I ran out of space. First, I start with the 3 core rulebooks. Then I have all the books that have player and DM resources and basically act as another player's handbook or monster manual or dungeon master's guide. These are your Volo's Guide to Monsters, Xanathar's Guide to Everything, Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes, and if I had a physical copy of Monsters of the Multiverse, it would go here as well. Those are all shelved in order of release date. Next come all the campaign setting books, once again in release order. Sword Coast Adventurer's Guide, Ravnica, Eberron. I would probably include Acquisitions Incorporated in this section as well. Then we get Mythic Odysseys of Theros, Explorer's Guide to Wildemount, and so on. You get the idea. And then we get the adventures, once again in order of release date, starting with Hoard of the Dragon Queen and running through the most current book that I have, which I believe is Journeys Through the Radiant Citadel. If I had physical copies of all the adventures, the last one would be Vecna, Eve of Ruin. Again, I'm not asking anyone to fill in the gaps, I just don't happen to have all the books. And then you might ask, well, what about the box sets? That depends a little bit on what sort of storage options I have available. For example, right now, the boxes for the starter sets are on their own shelf, but the booklets themselves from inside these starter sets are actually in protective sleeves and shelved with the other paperback adventures I have on that shelf down there. When I was in the old office before we switched rooms around, the Spelljammer box set was the last in my line of Wizards of the Coast books, but that's because it was also the most recent publication, so it went at the end of the row regardless. Right now, again, it's in the garage with some more of my books that I don't use as often because, again, this room is just a lot smaller. I don't have room for all my D&D stuff. Whenever the day comes that I have a dedicated office once again and all my RPG and otherwise nerdy books come out of storage and go back on the shelves, I don't know what I'm going to do about box sets like Spelljammer. If they go in chronological order, do they come out of the box set sleeve so they better match the rest of the books around them? Do I leave them in the box and just put them at the end of the row? Do I put them after the other setting books where they can maybe act as a dividing line between campaign settings and adventures? I would honestly have to see which one of those things bothered me the least after having it on my shelf in that arrangement for a few days or weeks or maybe months, and then tinker with it depending on what felt right. Now, there are times when a line of books does not have a format as strict as this. None of the books in the series might match each other in terms of the spine of the book or things like that, and that's okay. Comic books really have this issue, no pun intended, where the different Marvel paperbacks, for example, don't really match each other, so it doesn't really bother me to have them all alongside each other when they don't make an effort to match. And so there's potentially a world where I bought only the variant covers for all the 5th edition books, and in that scenario, it wouldn't bother me that much if they didn't all match. But of course, there were no variant covers for the first printings of the core rulebooks. When I picked those up, these standard covers were the only versions available. Sure, nowadays there are variant covers of the core rules from the same artist as a lot of the other variant covers, but I'm not about to run out and go buy another copy of all 3 books just to get the variant covers. And that is to say nothing of all the other books that they put out before alternate covers were ever a thing for 5th edition. Simply speaking, variant covers started too late for me to exclusively buy variant covers. Additionally, it's really hard for me to get on board with going entirely variant cover for every book in a series. And that is true for any series in any context. After all, what if a book comes out that I really want, but there is no variant cover? As in either they didn't make one that time, or it's not available where I go to buy the books. Again, no pun intended, but this is an issue I've had with comic books before. I don't like it when I have one issue of Iron Man or whatever, where the cover doesn't match the others for no clear reason, where I have one variant cover, only one in that series. And my comics are stored in long boxes. These covers are not even visible at all unless you pull the issue out and look at it. And yet it still bothers me even though it literally affects nothing at all. That Iron Man example was not hypothetical. I have a variant cover by Joe Quesada for issue 4 or 5 of Matt Fraction's 2008 Invincible Iron Man run, and it bothers me for literally no reason. So for a series of books where the spines are actually visible on my shelves at all times, going with all variant covers was never going to be an option that I was going to be happy with. And I'm honestly somewhat vindicated in that decision when I look at this list of covers, and I see how many D&D books never even got an alternate cover. So if I had, theoretically, gone with only variant covers, I wouldn't have been happy having the standard covers of some of my favorite 5e books, like Curse of Strahd or Wildmount. And that would have been a huge bummer. Because whatever book covers I have in a series, I am locked into. Years ago, my dear friend Jeffrey Gardner bought me the first Vox Machina fan art book. And because he's a super nice friend, he splurged and got me the deluxe version that looks like a library tome complete with a book ribbon. It was an absolutely incredible gift. But now, with each following Critical Role art book they release, I have to buy the version that matches that format. And that price difference is noticeable. Thankfully, I believe each of these was also gifted to me by Jeffrey because they don't come out very often and because he understands my plight. But if he hadn't done that and I wanted the new art book, which I certainly would because the art the fans make for Critical Role is incredible, well then I would just buy the super nice version for myself. It would honestly probably be cheaper to just buy the standard versions of all 3 books and switch to that format going forward, but once again, I'm in no hurry to repurchase books that I already own. This is also one of the reasons I don't buy book sets if the book series is still in progress and not all the books have been published yet. For example, take the Song of Ice and Fire series. You can absolutely argue about whether or not it's reasonable to assume George R.R. Martin will ever finish those books, and I'm absolutely not going to weigh in on that argument. But until such a time comes where the author or the publishers announce that they are not finishing the series, it doesn't make any sense to me to buy a 5-book box set for a series that's supposed to run for 7 books. I can buy individual books in a series, I don't mind doing that at all, but why buy a box set for a currently in-progress book series? That's so weird to me. And don't even get me started on books that have the poster of the movie or the TV show as the book cover. I don't like that. You get the movie posters on the first book or 2 in the series, and then the later books that haven't been adapted yet have the actual good cover art that matches the rest of the series, and I don't like it. I guess that didn't take too long to explain after all. And that's actually a perfect analogy for the D&D books. It doesn't matter how much I like a variant cover, just like it doesn't matter how much I like a movie poster. That's not the version of the book that I want. I want a book cover and spine, etc. that matches the intended design of that series of books. In the case of D&D 5th edition, I actually like the design of these covers a lot. They're extremely simple and straightforward, but they work for me. There are also very few D&D book covers for 5th edition that I just don't like. The variant covers, because they are a little more weird, are more hit and miss for me. I'm not going to put any specific covers on blast or anything because that would be an extremely shitty thing to do when we're talking about something that is 1000% personal preference and has nothing to do with whether the art is actually good or not. It's just about what I personally like. But even taking the individual covers out of the equation, I just like these spines. I like the way they're designed, and I like having the cover that we all recognize as the cover of the adventure or campaign setting book or core rule book or whatever it is. But now, because I have just spent however many minutes talking about how I am never going to buy a variant cover, I want to help make up for that and show these covers some love. Because if you like an alternate cover more than the standard cover, and the idea of not having a match set doesn't bother you the way that it clearly bothers me, then you should go for it. So I'm just going to list off my favorite alternate covers for D&D books. Hydra74 has made a bunch of covers for D&D, and I honestly think his Volo's Guide to Monsters cover is one of his strongest, although the Vecna Eve of Ruin alt cover is pretty good too. His alternate Witchlight cover is really cool because it's the same art style as most of his other alternate covers, but it's also different enough that I wasn't even sure it was the same artist despite there being a lot of similarities. It has a different vibe that matches the adventure in question, and I think that's really cool. But I think my favorite of his is his alternate cover for Xanathar's Guide to Everything. It's this very cool image of Xanathar's fishbowl with a bunch of eyes peering around the sides to look at the viewer, representing the Xanathar himself. And it's kind of cool and abstract, but it's also very literal. In a way, it's just Hydro's interpretation of the standard cover, and I really like it. Kevin Tong's alternate cover for Mythic Odysseys of Theros is truly stunning. It depicts the book's Hydra dueling with a god, and both of them are immense, but not so big that you lose track of the human who is fighting the Hydra as well. You can almost interpret this as the zoomed out version of the standard cover, or as if we're seeing the events of that standard cover through the eyes of a god. It's really cool and thematically excellent. Simon Mayer's alternate cover for Candlekeep Mysteries looks like a storybook, which is so perfectly appropriate for a book about a bunch of adventures about library books. The cover almost makes it feel like a book of fairy tales, and not only does that help capture the whimsy that so many of these adventures actually do have, but also, a book of fairy tales usually has a bunch of different stories in it, just like Candlekeep Mysteries does, so it works on multiple levels. I love Vance Kelly's alternate cover for Eberron Rising from the Last War. We're going to do a whole other video about campaign setting covers soon, I've been promising that for a while now, but as we'll discuss in that video, one of the reasons a cover like this works so well is because a campaign setting cover doesn't have to show you any characters, unlike how I believe a good player's handbook cover should. So, unburdened by that responsibility, Kelly just does their best to capture what is cool about Eberron, so we get a skyship hovering over a city. And the colors are simply gorgeous. This cover is a masterpiece. And I also really like Scott M. Fisher's alternate cover for Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft. I am always a sucker for covers that play with scale while including lots of different characters, so I enjoy that we see Strahd's eyes leering at us through the clouds above the other heroes and monsters and stuff. In fact, is this a reference to Bram Stoker's Dracula? Probably not, but maybe. Awkward time to reference Francis Ford Coppola given his recent on-set behavior, but what are you gonna do? I think this might be a reference, and it reminds me of that, and I think it's cool, and despite his actions, he's made some good movies, so that's the connection that makes sense to me. Now, at the beginning of this video, I talked about the alternate covers for the new set of core rulebooks, and those are all excellent covers. Obviously, they don't do any of the things that I talked about in my book cover videos. They don't communicate the ideas of what the book is about the same way that the standard covers do, but they don't have to. They're alternate covers. They're literally just for fun. Back when there was a whole lot of discourse about the new player's handbook cover, I saw people online saying that they wished the alternate cover was the primary cover because they just liked it a lot better. And I really strongly disagree that this should have been the main cover because, of course I do. I made a whole video about why I think the new player's handbook cover is excellent at communicating the ideas of what D&D is to a new audience member and potential player, and the alternate cover doesn't do any of that. But also, if you're planning on picking up the new books and you just like the alternate cover more than the standard cover, then you should buy this version instead. I think these covers are great. My favorite of the new variant covers is the Dungeon Master's Guide, the one with Lolth on it. It reminds me of something like Over the Garden Wall. It's both cozy and sinister in a way that I really dig. I just can't get over my own issues enough to buy these covers, but you should if you want them. I'll just have to live vicariously through you. Like I said, I wish I could get over my hangups and buy a variant cover, but I wouldn't even enjoy having it on my shelf along with the other 5e books, so that just is not happening anytime soon. But let me know, do you have a favorite D&D variant cover? Do you plan to pick up any of these alternate covers for the 2024 rules? Are you like me and you have your own little idiosyncrasies around picking up variant covers? Let me know in the comments below. And while you're down there, make sure to like and subscribe and ring the bell, do the YouTube things. If you'd like to support the channel financially, you can check out my Patreon or my Ko-fi or become a YouTube member. You can also join my Discord server and hang out with other awesome people, and sign up for my newsletter to catch my latest updates. Make sure you're registered to vote, and then make sure to actually vote, because quite frankly, I would never like to hear Donald Trump's stupid fucking voice ever again. It looks like we could probably make that happen if we all vote. Click here to watch my latest video about GM screens. It's a really good one. Until next time, play fair and have fun.